Somewhere between the day you just lived and the sleep waiting to take you, there is a frequency. You won't find it on any dial. It doesn't broadcast on a schedule. It comes when the hour is late and the lights are low, and you are ready to go somewhere without leaving where you are. This is the midnight frequency. What follows are radio dramas, some set in the smoky, rain-soaked world of the old golden age, where private detectives walked dark streets and every shadow had a secret. Some take place closer to now, some venture further out, into times and places that haven't happened yet. All of them are original stories, written in the spirit of the programs that once kept the whole country listening in the dark. From this moment forward, there are no interruptions, no commercials, nothing to pull you back. If you found something here worth returning to, we'd be grateful for your support. The details are in the show notes, but that's for later. Right now, there is only the story. Get comfortable. Let it come.
The response framework Okafor had been building for 6 days was not a simple thing. John had watched it grow on her console the way you watch a structure being assembled, piece by piece, each element placed with care and then checked against the others to ensure it fit precisely where it needed to fit. She worked on it in long, uninterrupted blocks and in short bursts between other tasks and occasionally in the middle of conversations about something else entirely, stopping to add a notation or revise a section before returning to whatever had been interrupted. Torres reviewed each mathematical element as it was finalized, not because Okafor needed the help, but because 2 sets of eyes on something this important was not a redundancy, it was a minimum. John reviewed the signal parameters, the encoding format, the transmission specifications, the aspects of the framework that were his domain rather than theirs, and found them clean. What the framework needed to accomplish was specific, and, once Okafor had articulated it, obvious in the way that the right answer to a hard problem was often obvious once someone said it aloud. The curriculum from the approaching vessel had been designed to teach. A response that merely confirmed receipt would say only that someone was listening, which the approaching vessel presumably already knew from 11 months of passive sensor observation, showing a survey vessel in its path. A response that repeated elements of the curriculum back would say only that the recipient could copy, not that it could think. What was needed was a response that demonstrated comprehension through extension, that took the shared mathematical vocabulary and used it to produce something the senders could not have anticipated, something that could only have come from a mind that had genuinely understood what it was taught and could apply that understanding independently. Okafor called this proving genuine learning rather than playback. The mathematical content she chose was elegant, and John appreciated it even without fully following the derivation. She took the arithmetic layer and the geometry layer and combined them in a way that produced a new result, a relationship between quantities that followed necessarily from what had been established but that the curriculum had not yet demonstrated. She was, in effect, doing the next exercise in the course before the instructor had assigned it. Any mind that had sent the curriculum and understood its own content would recognize immediately that the response was not a recording or a reflection, but a product of reasoning. The extension was the proof, but that was only half of what the framework contained. The second element was something Okafor had introduced on day 5 of building it, and which had taken her 2 more days to be satisfied with, and it was the part that John thought about most in the quiet hours of his watch. It was a self-reference, a marker built from the pointer structures the curriculum had introduced in its later sections that indicated the origin of the transmission. Not a location in space, though the transmission's origin point would be evident from simple triangulation. Something more specific. A marker that said this transmission comes from an entity, from a particular mind or set of minds that is separate from and different from you, and that is the author of what follows rather than a passive relay. The first grammatical step toward something that could, in time, be used to mean we. Without it, Okafor said when she explained the decision to Captain Reyes, the response is a proof of comprehension, but not a proof of presence. We want them to know there is a mind on this end, not just a receiver. Reyes looked at the framework for a long time and approved it. They transmitted on day 31, 11 hours after the authorization came through. The transmission itself took 4.3 seconds, which was a short time for something of its significance, and then the signal was moving outward from the Orion at the speed of light, and there was nothing to do but wait. The round-trip time at current distance was just over 44 minutes. John set a timer and then looked at the timer and understood that watching it would not make it run faster, and so he found other things to do, which in practice meant monitoring the ship's systems with an attention that was, even by his standards, excessive. Okafor sat in the comms bay and read. Torres did something with a notebook that appeared to be pure mathematics, unrelated to anything currently at hand, which was, John had learned, how Torres managed the kind of waiting she could not calculate her way out of. At 46 minutes and 31 seconds, the signal changed. Not a new signal. The same carrier, the same encoding system, the same source. But where the curriculum had been running in its patient sequential layers, there was a new element. Embedded cleanly into the ongoing transmission, not interrupting the curriculum, but sitting alongside it, in a secondary modulation layer that Torres had to look twice to confirm she was reading correctly. They responded to the response, Torres said. The secondary layer was brief. 3 elements in sequence. The first was a mathematical statement that Torres and Okafor identified within seconds as the extension Okafor had included in the response, the proof of comprehension, reflected back not as a copy, but with an additional step, the next step in the derivation, the course continuing from exactly the point where the Orion had demonstrated it had reached. The instructor acknowledging the student's work by building on it rather than simply grading it. The second element was the self-referencing marker from the Orion's response, modified. The modification was subtle and took Torres 20 minutes to characterize precisely, and when she did, the room was quiet for a moment before anyone spoke. The marker had been altered in a way that added a layer of structure around it, a containing structure, and within that containing structure, the Orion's marker sat alongside a second marker that was new. 2 markers, 2 origins, 2 entities in the relationship that the curriculum had been carefully encoding. They had answered the self-reference with a self-reference of their own. They're saying here we are too, Okafor said. Her voice had the quality it had when she was working to stay precise in the presence of something that wanted to be larger than precision. The third element was something neither Torres nor Okafor had a framework for yet, and it occupied most of the next 12 hours of analysis. It was a structure that used the pointer system extensively, pointing repeatedly at the self-reference markers, at both of them, and then at a third element that appeared to encode something about the curriculum itself, about the process of transmission and reception, and the relationship between the sender and the recipient of a structured lesson. Okafor's eventual interpretation, offered carefully and with the specific hedges she used when she was confident in the reasoning but not yet in the translation, was that the third element was something like an acknowledgement of the contact itself as a distinct thing from the content of the contact. Not just the math, the exchange, the fact of 2 entities meeting in the signal and recognizing each other there. They're marking the moment, she said, not what was said, that it was said and heard and answered. The curriculum accelerated after the exchange. Not dramatically, not in a way that felt rushed, but the pacing that had been calibrated for a recipient absorbing each layer from scratch was now calibrated for something faster, a recipient that had demonstrated it could keep up. And the Xenolinguistics layer that had been unfolding over days began to move at a rate that kept Torres working without breaks. And Okafor, filling notebooks she would not fully translate for weeks. The molecular structures came faster, the bonding relationships, the chains of atoms that organized themselves into the building blocks of complex chemistry, and alongside them something new that Okafor flagged on day 33 and spent 2 days confirming before she brought it to the full team. The new element was in the chemistry layer, but it was not purely chemistry. It was chemistry deployed in a specific direction toward a specific subject, and the subject was life. Not life in general. The abstract conditions under which chemistry organized itself into living systems, the kinds of molecular relationships that gave rise to metabolism and replication, and the other fundamental properties that distinguish living matter from inert matter. The curriculum was not describing any particular biology. It was describing the concept of biology as a category, the idea that matter could be arranged in ways that sustained and reproduced themselves. They don't know what we're made of, Torres said. They know we're made of something, Okafor said. They don't know if our biochemistry resembles theirs. They're establishing the category before they describe their specific case. So that when they do describe their specific case, we have the vocabulary to understand it. She paused. This is where we start learning what they actually are, not abstractly. Specifically, what they eat, what they breathe, what temperatures they can survive in. John thought about the 4 atmospheric zones in the thermal profile. 4 different temperatures. 4 different gas compositions. 4 different answers to the question of what a living thing needed to stay alive. The biology layer was not going to be a single description. It was going to be 4, at minimum. On day 35, with 6 days until close approach, he sent his nightly status report to the survey authority, and then sat for a while in the quiet of the secondary comms bay after the rest of the crew had gone to sleep, or to their own private versions of processing. The signal was running on the main display, the biology layer moving through its patient demonstrations, and he watched it the way he watched most things, with the particular quality of attention that did not demand anything from what it observed, but simply remained present with it. He thought about what it meant that this curriculum existed at all. Not that someone had built it, which was remarkable enough, but that it had been built for a recipient who might be anything. The curriculum made no assumptions about cognition, about sensory modality, about the specific form that mathematical reasoning took in the recipient's mind. It was designed to work for any mind that had developed mathematics, period, without further specification. The only assumption was the one assumption that could be made with confidence: that a mind capable of building and operating a deep survey vessel had developed mathematics because you could not navigate the physics of interstellar space without it. That was a very narrow assumption. And from that very narrow assumption, the curriculum had been building towards something that was not narrow at all. He thought about the self-reference marker, the second one, the one the approaching vessel had sent back. 2 markers now, 2 origins, 2 entities in the exchange. He thought about the acknowledgement of the contact itself as a distinct thing from the content, the marking of the moment. He thought about 6 days. The signal continued on the display, patient and accelerating, and outside the narrow windows of the comms bay, the stars held their ancient positions, and somewhere in the 6 days of distance ahead of them, 4 kinds of life were moving through the same dark, toward the same point. And the language that would eventually be adequate to the meeting was being built, piece by careful piece, out of the only material available. The structure of the universe itself, which was the one thing both sides could verify from where they stood.
This has been the Midnight Frequency. The studio goes dark now. Sleep well.